There's a haunting video that plays on loop in cancer wards across America. In it, a bald, gaunt man stares directly into the camera with hollow eyes. His voice is barely a whisper, but his message thunders. Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke. The man in the video, a Hollywood legend who once commanded millions per film. By the time you finish watching this, you'll understand why his final warning became one of the most powerful anti-smoking messages ever recorded. Patrick Swayze, the dancer who couldn't catch his breath. Patrick Swayze epitomized Hollywood cool. With his smoldering good looks, incredible dance moves, and genuine acting chops, he captured hearts worldwide in Dirty Dancing and Ghost. Off-screen, Swayze was known as a genuinely nice guy, devoted to his wife Lisa Niemi and passionate about flying, ranching, and living life to the fullest. He was also a chain smoker, consuming up to 60 cigarettes daily at his peak 3 full packs. The man who made audiences swoon with his graceful movements was slowly suffocating his own lungs. In January 2008, Swayze was diagnosed with stage IV pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms of cancer with a 5-year survival rate of less than 10%. Pancreatic cancer is notoriously difficult to detect early and devastatingly aggressive. While multiple factors contribute to this disease, smoking significantly increases the risk. Studies show smokers are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop pancreatic cancer than non-smokers. Swayze fought with characteristic determination. He continued working on the TV series The Beast, even while undergoing brutal chemotherapy treatments. In interviews, he remained optimistic, refusing to be defined by his diagnosis. But the disease was relentless. On the 14th of September 2009, just 20 months after his diagnosis, Patrick Swayze died at age 57, surrounded by his family at his Los Angeles home. His death shocked fans worldwide. Here was a man synonymous with vitality and physicality, cut down in what should have been his prime. Lisa Niemi later spoke candidly about Patrick's smoking habit and how he deeply regretted not quitting sooner. His legacy now includes not just his memorable performances, but also a cautionary tale about the consequences of tobacco addiction. David Bowie, the starman who fell to earth. David Bowie wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural chameleon, an artist who constantly reinvented himself and pushed boundaries. From Ziggy Stardust to The Thin White Duke, from his Berlin trilogy to his surprising comeback with Black Star, Bowie's influence on music, fashion, and art cannot be overstated. He was also a heavy smoker for most of his life. Those iconic photos of Bowie with a cigarette dangling from his lips weren't just rock and roll posturing, they represented a decades-long addiction. Even after suffering a heart attack in 2004 that required emergency surgery, Bowie struggled to quit completely. In early 2016, Bowie released Black Star, an experimental, haunting album that critics praised as a bold new direction. Fans celebrated the Starman's return. What they didn't know was that Bowie had been privately battling liver cancer for 18 months. The album, it turned out, was his parting gift, a carefully crafted farewell that took on profound new meaning after his death. On the 10th of January 2016, just 2 days after his 69th birthday and the release of Black Star, David Bowie died at his Manhattan home. The world mourned the loss of an irreplaceable artistic genius. While liver cancer has multiple causes, smoking is a significant risk factor, and Bowie's long history with cigarettes likely contributed to his disease. His producer, Tony Visconti, later revealed that Bowie knew he was dying while making Black Star and intended it as his parting gift to fans. The album's themes of mortality and transformation took on heartbreaking significance. Videos like Lazarus, featuring a bedridden Bowie, became devastatingly prophetic. Alan Rickman, the voice silenced too soon. Alan Rickman possessed one of the most distinctive voices in cinema, a deep, precise, slightly sardonic instrument that could convey menace, humor, or heartbreak with equal facility. From his breakthrough role as Hans Gruber in Die Hard to his iconic portrayal of Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series, Rickman brought gravitas and complexity to every role. British audiences knew him from the stage long before Hollywood discovered him. Rickman was a classically trained actor who approached his craft with seriousness and dedication. He was also notoriously private, rarely discussing his personal life in interviews. What few people knew was that Rickman had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He kept his illness private, continuing to work and maintain his professional commitments. Like Patrick Swayze, Rickman had been a longtime smoker, though he'd quit years before his diagnosis. Tragically, the damage from decades of smoking can persist long after someone quits. Pancreatic cancer often develops slowly, its origins potentially dating back years before symptoms appear. On the 14th of January 2016, just 4 days after David Bowie's death, Alan Rickman died in London at age 69. The entertainment world reeled from losing two beloved figures in the same week. His Harry Potter co-stars expressed shock and grief. Daniel Radcliffe wrote a moving tribute calling Rickman one of the greatest actors I will ever work with and one of the loyalest and most supportive people I've ever met. Rickman's death particularly resonated because of Snape's arc in the Harry Potter series, A Man with Secrets, who made sacrifices unrecognized until after his death. The parallel was almost unbearably poignant. Leonard Cohen, the poet who ran out of time. Leonard Cohen's gravelly voice and poetic lyrics made him one of the most respected singer-songwriters of his generation. Songs like Hallelujah, Suzanne, and Bird on the Wire have achieved timeless status, covered by countless artists. Cohen's work explored themes of love, loss, spirituality, and human frailty with rare depth and honesty. Cohen was a lifelong smoker, and unlike some artists who tried to hide their habit, he was relatively open about it. Photographs often showed him with a cigarette, and he referenced smoking in his work. His distinctive raspy voice, which added so much character to his performances, was partly the result of decades of tobacco use. In his final years, Cohen experienced a creative renaissance. His 2016 album, You Want It Darker, was released in October to critical acclaim. It was darker and more meditative than his previous work, with Cohen's voice deeper and more fragile than ever. The title track, with its haunting refrain, "I'm ready, my Lord," seemed almost like a spiritual preparation for death. On the 7th of November 2016, Leonard Cohen died at his Los Angeles home at age 82. His death, just weeks after the album's release, gave You Want It Darker a profound finality. While his record label initially stated he died in his sleep, his son later revealed Cohen had suffered a fall in the middle of the night and died from injuries sustained in that fall. However, Cohen had been dealing with multiple health issues, including cancer, and his longtime smoking habit had contributed to various conditions that affected his health in his final years. Christopher Hitchens, the contrarian who met his match. Christopher Hitchens was brilliantly eloquent, fiercely intelligent, and deliberately provocative. As a journalist, essayist, and public intellectual, he challenged conventional wisdom on religion, politics, and society. His book, God Is Not Great, made him one of the most prominent voices of new atheism. He debated everyone from religious leaders to political figures, always armed with devastating wit and encyclopedic knowledge. Hitchens openly embraced life's pleasures, particularly alcohol and tobacco. He smoked and drank heavily for decades, considering it part of his writerly identity. He once wrote that, "The essence of the independent mind lies not in what it thinks, but in how it thinks." In June 2010, while on a book tour, Hitchens was hospitalized with excruciating pain. Tests revealed stage 4 esophageal cancer. For a man whose livelihood depended on his voice and eloquence, it was a particularly cruel diagnosis. Esophageal cancer is strongly linked to smoking and alcohol consumption, and Hitchens never denied the connection. With characteristic intellectual honesty, Hitchens wrote about his cancer diagnosis and treatment in a series of essays for Vanity Fair, later collected in the book Mortality, and his thoughts on death. He didn't ask for pity, didn't suddenly find religion, and didn't pretend that his lifestyle choices hadn't contributed to his condition. "I have been taunting the reaper into taking a free scythe in my direction," he wrote, acknowledging the role his smoking and drinking played in his cancer. Yet he also grappled with whether he regretted those choices, ultimately concluding the question was more complex than simple regret. Christopher Hitchens died on the 15th of December 2011 at age 62. His death robbed the world of one of its most compelling voices. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who'd spent his life using words to challenge and enlighten was silenced by a disease directly linked to one of his few unquestioned habits. Roger Ebert, the critic who lost his voice, Roger Ebert's thumb up or down could make or break a movie. For decades, he was America's most influential film critic, first through his reviews in the Chicago Sun-Times and later through his television show with Gene Siskel. Ebert loved movies with genuine passion, and his writing made film criticism accessible to millions. Ebert had been a smoker, though he quit in the 1,970 seconds. Like many who quit, he thought he'd escape tobacco's consequences. But in 2002, he was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. The surgery seemed successful initially, but the cancer returned, spreading to his salivary glands and jaw. What followed was a years-long medical nightmare. Multiple surgeries removed much of Ebert's lower jaw, leaving him unable to speak, eat, or drink normally. The man who'd made his living with words lost his voice entirely. He communicated through writing and eventually through a computerized voice system that used clips from his old television shows. The connection between smoking and salivary gland cancer, while less direct than with lung cancer, is well established. Even decades after quitting, former smokers face elevated cancer risks. Ebert never publicly dwelt on this connection, instead focusing his remaining years on continuing his work. He reviewed movies through writing, maintained an active online presence, and wrote a moving memoir, Life Itself. Roger Ebert died on the 4th of April 2013. At age 70, his final review, posted just 2 days before his death, ended with words that now serve as his epitaph. I'll see you at the movies. Even silenced by cancer, Ebert never lost his love for cinema or his gift for communication. Peter Jennings, the anchorman who couldn't stop. Peter Jennings was the face of ABC News for over 2 decades. As anchor of World News Tonight, his calm, authoritative presence guided Americans through countless major events. Canadian-born but thoroughly embraced by American audiences, Jennings represented the ideal of serious broadcast journalism. Behind the scenes, Jennings struggled with cigarettes. He'd smoked since his teenage years, quit for 20 years, then relapsed after the September 11 attacks. The stress of covering that traumatic event and its aftermath proved too much, and Jennings returned to his old habit. It was a decision he would come to deeply regret. In April 2005, Jennings announced on air that he'd been diagnosed with lung cancer and would be stepping away to focus on treatment. His voice was shaky, his usual composure cracked by the weight of his diagnosis. "I've been remiss in not talking about it more," he said of smoking. "Now, with this diagnosis, I have to." The progression was shockingly fast. Jennings, who had seemed invincible behind the anchor desk, was dead within 4 months. On the 7th of August 2005, just shy of his 67th birthday, Peter Jennings succumbed to lung cancer at his home in New York. His death sparked widespread discussion about smoking and relapse. Here was a man who'd successfully quit for 2 decades, only to have a moment of weakness under extreme stress undo all those smoke-free years. It was a stark reminder that nicotine addiction is powerful and unforgiving, and that relapses can be fatal. Yul Brynner. The final warning. Now we return to the man from the opening, the bald, gaunt figure in that haunting video. Yul Brynner was one of old Hollywood's most distinctive stars. With his shaved head and intense presence, he commanded the screen in films like The King and I, for which he won an Oscar, The 10 Commandments, and The Magnificent Seven. Brynner's exotic looks and powerful performances made him unforgettable. He was also a heavy smoker, consuming multiple packs daily for decades. Those dramatic pauses in his performances, often accommodating the cigarette he'd just taken a drag from. The deep, distinctive voice, shaped partly by tobacco's effects on his vocal cords. In 1983, Brynner was diagnosed with lung cancer. Despite aggressive treatment, the cancer spread. Knowing he was dying, Brynner did something remarkable. He recorded an anti-smoking commercial even as cancer ravaged his body. In it, a visibly ill Brynner stares into the camera and delivers his final message. "Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke. If I could take back that smoking, we wouldn't be talking about any cancer." Yul Brynner died on the 10th of October 1985 at age 65. As per his wishes, his anti-smoking commercial began airing the day after his death. The impact was profound. Here was a Hollywood star, stripped of all glamour by disease, using his final breaths to warn others. The American Cancer Society reported that the commercial generated an unprecedented response, with many smokers attempting to quit. Brenner's posthumous message represented something unique in celebrity anti-smoking advocacy: the absolute absence of ego or image protection. He allowed the world to see him dying, ravaged by cancer, to drive home his point. Decades later, that video remains one of the most powerful anti-tobacco messages ever created. More stars, more tragedies. The list, heartbreakingly, goes on. Sammy Davis Jr., the legendary entertainer, died from throat cancer in 1990 at age 64. His voice, one of his greatest instruments, stolen by the very cigarettes he'd smoked throughout his career. George Harrison, the quiet Beatle whose spiritual journey and musical innovations inspired millions, died from lung cancer in 2001 at 58. Even years after quitting, his past smoking caught up with him. Walt Disney, whose name became synonymous with animation and family entertainment, died from lung cancer in 1966 at 65. One of the most creative minds of the 20th century was silenced by a preventable disease. Luciano Pavarotti, whose operatic voice was considered one of the finest ever recorded, died from pancreatic cancer in 2007. While he'd quit smoking years earlier, the damage was already done. Michael Landon, beloved for his roles in Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie, died from pancreatic cancer in 1991 at just 54. Desi Arnaz, the innovative producer and performer who co-created I Love Lucy, died from lung cancer in 1986 at 69. Larry Hagman, who played the iconic J.R. Ewing on Dallas, survived liver cancer, requiring a transplant, but eventually succumbed to complications from throat cancer in 2012. At 81, both cancers linked to his former smoking habit. Eddie Albert lived to 99 but spent his final years battling the effects of decades of smoking. John Wayne, the ultimate symbol of American masculinity and toughness, fought lung cancer for years before dying from stomach cancer in 1979 at 72, his immune system weakened by tobacco's long-term effects. Each of these individuals possessed extraordinary talents. They brought joy, inspiration, and entertainment to millions. They had access to the best medical care money could buy, yet none of that could save them from tobacco's delayed but inevitable consequences. The science behind the tragedy. Why is smoking so deadly? The numbers are staggering. Cigarette smoke contains over 7,000 chemicals, with at least 70 known to cause cancer. When inhaled, these carcinogens damage DNA and cells throughout the body. Most of the time, the body's repair mechanisms fix this damage. But with repeated exposure, cigarette after cigarette, day after day, year after year, some damaged cells slip through. They begin multiplying uncontrollably. That's cancer. Smoking doesn't just cause lung cancer. It's linked to cancers of the mouth, throat, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, liver, kidney, bladder, cervix, and colon. It causes heart disease, stroke, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. It damages blood vessels, impairs immune function, and accelerates aging. There is literally no part of the body that tobacco doesn't harm. What makes smoking particularly insidious is the delay between cause and effect. A teenager who starts smoking doesn't immediately develop cancer. The consequences unfold over decades, by which time nicotine addiction is deeply entrenched. Many of the celebrities discussed here started smoking when they were young, when cigarettes were socially acceptable or even encouraged, when tobacco companies suppressed research showing the dangers, when doctors appeared in cigarette advertisements claiming certain brands were healthier. By the time the scientific consensus on smoking's dangers became undeniable in the 1,960 seconds and beyond, millions were already addicted. Quitting nicotine is extraordinarily difficult. Studies suggest it's as addictive as heroin or cocaine. Even those who successfully quit, like Roger Ebert and George Harrison, discovered that their years of smoking had set biological processes in motion that couldn't be reversed. The industry's responsibility. These celebrity deaths didn't occur in a vacuum. For decades, tobacco companies deliberately marketed cigarettes to young people, suppressed their own research showing the deadly effects of smoking, manipulated nicotine levels to enhance addiction, and fought against public health measures. Internal documents revealed that executives knew exactly how dangerous and addictive their products were while publicly denying it. Hollywood played a role too. For much of the 20th century, smoking was ubiquitous in films and television. It made characters look cool, sophisticated, rebellious, or thoughtful. Tobacco companies paid for product placement. Young audiences absorbed the message that smoking was glamorous and adult. Many of the celebrities discussed here started smoking partly because of this cultural milieu and then became part of it themselves, their on-screen smoking influencing the next generation. Thankfully, this has changed. Smoking rates have declined dramatically in many countries due to public health campaigns, regulations, taxes, and cultural shifts. Smoking in films has decreased significantly. Tobacco advertising is restricted or banned in many places. The truth about smoking's dangers is now undeniable and widely known. Yet tobacco still kills more than 8 million people worldwide every year, including more than 480,000 inches in the United States alone. It remains the leading cause of preventable death globally. New generations continue to start smoking, and newer products like e-cigarettes create new concerns and unknowns. Conclusion. The final curtain. 17 talented individuals, hundreds of memorable performances, millions of fans, countless contributions to art, entertainment, and culture. All cut short or diminished by a product that was marketed to them, that addicted them, that killed them.